In an alternate universe where the Death Star destroyed Yavin 4, the galaxy would spiral into a period of overwhelming darkness. The Empire's victory at Yavin would have shattered the Rebel Alliance, wiping out not only their central base but also the many leaders, strategists, and Jedi who had gathered in the hidden jungles of the moon. Yavin 4 had been more than just a base. It was a symbol of hope, a rallying point where the disparate and often divided forces of the rebellion could unite under a common cause. Losing Yavin 4 would do more than decimate the rebellion's infrastructure. It would cut out the heart of the movement, sending a ripple of despair across the galaxy. Without the triumphant Yavin, the few remaining cells of the Rebel Alliance would face overwhelming demoralization. The sheer power of the Death Star, now proven unstoppable after obliterating Alderaan and Yavin 4, would send an unmistakable message of absolute Imperial dominance. Many among the rebellion, faced with the Empire's unyielding might surrender or abandon the cause altogether. The sense of unity and determination that had held the Alliance together in the darkest times would dissipate, leaving only a few die-hard freedom fighters scattered across the galaxy. Even among the populace who had secretly harbored rebellious thoughts, a veil of fear would fall, stifling the will to resist. With Yavin destroyed, Luke Skywalker's fate would diverge drastically. The young farmer from Tatooine, freshly thrust into the conflict, would likely perish alongside the rest of the Rebel Alliance. The galaxy would never come to know him as the brave pilot who fired the shot that destroyed the Death Star, nor would the hope of the last known Skywalker bloodline carry through to inspire the galaxy. Obi-Wan Kenobi's sacrifice would be for naught. His teachings and his plans to train Luke would be lost to the ashes of Yavin. In this timeline, the ancient knowledge of the Jedi would face near extinction, with only scattered fragments surviving, possibly guarded by hermits and fanatics who had long been in hiding. The Empire's doctrine against the Jedi and any Force users would become even more severe, eliminating any hint of Force tradition across the galaxy. Without a unifying victory to inspire uprisings, the Rebel Alliance's sympathizers would become targets rather than allies. On planets like Mon Cala, Corellia, and Sullust, any whispers of defiance would be smothered as the Empire cracked down harder on insubordination. Emperor Palpatine, emboldened by the Death Star's demonstrated power, would deploy the superweapon as an ultimate tool of fear, obliterating planets that showed signs of resistance. Worlds with historical ties to the Jedi, or planets known for strong-willed populations, like Dantooine or Ryloth, would be under the constant threat of annihilation, giving the Empire a chilling control over the galaxy's psyche. Coruscant would become an even greater symbol of Imperial rule, with the Emperor likely reasserting his grip on the Senate, or whatever remained of it, with a firmer hand than before. The absence of Luke and the scattered Jedi would lead to the Empire's unchecked rise, creating a galaxy void of hope, light, and balance. Those sensitive to the Force would either go untrained or be hunted down by the Emperor's Inquisitors, who would have free rein to purge the galaxy of any threats to the Sith. Without the hope of the Jedi, the Force itself would feel an imbalance, one that would reverberate across worlds and species, who would be left with only the dark side's oppressive shadow. The Dark Clone Wars would only deepen as the Emperor's clones and his operatives worked in every sector of the galaxy, tightening their grip on resources, systems, and individual freedoms. Leia Organa's death on Yavin 4 would mean the end of one of the most influential leaders in the rebellion. Bail Organa, her adoptive father, had already perished with Alderaan, and with Leia's loss, the Organa's legacy of resistance would vanish. Her efforts to reunite the galaxy's various factions, her wisdom and courage in the face of tyranny, all of it would be lost. Leia had been the glue binding many rebel factions together, and with her gone, the rebellion would lose a leader of unmatched strength. Princess Leia had embodied both the spirit of defiance and compassion, showing that resilience could coexist with empathy, even in the face of overwhelming power. Her death would be an irreplaceable blow to the galaxy, leaving a vacuum that no other could fill. Han Solo, the scoundrel-turned-hero, would also perish on Yavin 4, denying him the chance to grow beyond his smuggler past. Han's journey toward becoming a responsible leader and dedicated friend would be cut short, and the Millennium Falcon would be reduced to space debris. The galaxy would never know the bond between him and Luke, nor the hero he would become. Chewbacca, too, would die alongside him, severing a lifeline between the Alliance and the Wookiees of Kashyyyk, who had long resisted the Empire's cruelty. The loss of the Falcon and its crew would also mean a loss of the iconic ship's capability to rally allies and transport essential supplies across hostile Imperial space lanes. The absence of a rebellion victory would embolden Grand Moff Tarkin and Darth Vader, both of whom would receive commendations and expanded authority. Tarkin, having masterminded the Death Star's deployment, would likely be tasked with further strengthening the Imperial grip on star systems, instituting harsher policies, and destroying planets where unrest brewed. His doctrine of fear would be proven beyond doubt, solidifying his position as the Empire's enforcer. The Tarkin doctrine, which sought to rule through fear, would now have a tangible example with the Death Star, a device that would loom over the galaxy as a reminder of the Empire's unchallenged might. Darth Vader, while fiercely loyal to the Emperor, would face a life deprived of the eventual redemption he found through Luke. Stripped of the chance to rediscover his humanity, he would fully immerse himself in the dark side, becoming the Emperor's unrelenting weapon. Vader's presence would bring even greater terror to those he hunted, and without Luke's influence, he would continue down a path devoid of redemption. His sense of regret and internal conflict would be buried beneath layers of rage and obedience, and the light of Anakin Skywalker would be forever extinguished in the dark side's embrace. Across the galaxy, Yavin 4's destruction would reverberate in unseen ways. Smugglers, bounty hunters, and mercenaries, who had often played both sides, would find it increasingly difficult to operate independently as the Empire consolidated its power. Black markets, cantinas, and shadowy underworld networks would come under closer scrutiny. Some might still resist in small, defiant acts, but they would be few and far between, and the penalties for being caught would be harsher than ever. Fear would rule the Outer Rim as much as the core worlds, erasing any illusions of autonomy that had existed before the Empire's full-scale domination. Yavin 4's destruction would herald a future where the Empire's reach knew no limits, no opposition, and no constraints. Planets like Tatooine and Jakku, long neglected and ignored by the Empire, would become staging grounds for new Imperial facilities and outposts, extending the Emperor's reach even to the furthest stars. The rise of Imperial academies on these backwater worlds would see the Empire recruiting younger generations from previously untouched populations, indoctrinating them into a regime that eliminated hope and diversity of thought. The Outer Rim, once a wild expanse beyond Imperial control, would transform into a landscape as ordered and bleak as the heart of the Empire itself. In the aftermath of Yavin 4's destruction, the galaxy would shift into a prolonged era of despotism and despair. The Rebel Alliance, already weakened by its meager resources and constant threats, would be effectively crushed. Pockets of resistance, if any survived, would be isolated and scattered, leaving them unable to coordinate or rebuild. The courage that had once bound rebels together would dissipate, replaced by a grim understanding that the Empire was unassailable. With the Death Star at the heart of its arsenal, the Empire would have a constant weapon of mass destruction to wield against any would-be dissidents, ensuring that even the thought of rebellion would be quelled. The political consequences would be profound. With the rebellion no longer a threat, the Empire would likely abolish the last remnants of the Senate, permanently dismantling any facade of democracy. Coruscant, already a symbol of the Empire's might, would become an absolute stronghold where Palpatine could rule unopposed, enforcing his will through sheer terror. The galaxy would lose what little political representation it had, turning Palpatine's rule into an iron grip that extended to every corner of the galaxy. His ideology would permeate every aspect of life, with Imperial doctrine becoming the only acceptable creed in education, media, and trade. Dissent would become not just illegal but dangerous, a silent reminder that the Empire could reach anyone, anywhere, with devastating consequences. With no united rebellion, fewer neutral systems would be able to maintain any semblance of independence. Before Yavin 4's destruction, some planets could avoid the Empire's full attention by remaining neutral or subtly supporting the rebellion. Now, however, the Empire would tighten its control over these worlds, seizing their resources, conscripting their citizens, and dismantling any cultural or governmental structures that didn't align with Imperial ideals. Planets that once had proud traditions like Naboo or Mandalore would be forcibly assimilated into the Empire's monolithic structure, their histories and practices erased or repurposed for the Imperial agenda. The death of the remaining Jedi would add an even darker layer to this grim scenario. Luke's survival and journey were essential to restoring the balance of the Force, and without him, The galaxy would be bereft of the wisdom and legacy of the Jedi Order. The loss of Luke would mean the last hope for the Force's light side would perish with him. This would leave only the Sith's influence, and the dark side would corrupt the galaxy unchecked. Palpatine's mastery of the dark side would allow him to impose his influence over Force-sensitive beings across the galaxy, creating a ripple effect of darkness that would taint generations to come. Beyond this, the Empire would likely expand its Force-sensitive purge, using its resources to hunt down any remaining practitioners or potential Jedi in hiding. Children with even a hint of Force sensitivity would be taken, either to be molded into loyal inquisitors or destroyed. Parents, fearful of the Empire's wrath, would hide their children's abilities, creating a culture where the Force became a taboo, spoken of only in hushed whispers and fearful legends. The Force itself would be perceived not as an ancient mystical energy binding the galaxy together, but as a tool of tyranny, associated solely with the Emperor and his dark enforcers. Darth Vader's fate would be irrevocably altered. Without Luke, there would be no catalyst for his redemption, no chance for Anakin Skywalker to resurface. Vader would remain forever lost to the dark side, his soul imprisoned in armor and hatred, devoid of hope or memory of who he once was. The conflicts that haunted him, the faint glimmers of remorse and the ghostly pull of his past would be buried under layers of rage and obedience to his master. His role as the Emperor's enforcer would become more absolute, and he would grow into a being of pure darkness, feared across the galaxy as a figure of unrestrained brutality. The Emperor would exploit this new Vader to his fullest potential, deploying him across the galaxy to squash any remaining symbols of resistance. Any planet harboring rumors of rebellion would face Vader's wrath, and his presence alone would be enough to silence would-be heroes. His status as the Emperor's chosen instrument would make him a living symbol of Imperial might, and his legend would eclipse even the darkest tales of Sith in history. With each world he conquered, with each life he extinguished, the galaxy's will to fight back would weaken, until only hushed whispers of rebellion remained, spoken in secret and quickly silenced. The Dark Clone Wars would escalate under the Emperor's guidance, with an increasing number of clones and other Imperial forces deployed to ensure stability through terror. Entire species could face extinction or enslavement as the Empire expanded its territories unchecked, exploiting the galaxy's natural and biological resources with ruthless efficiency. Kamino, the birthplace of the clone army, would likely become a central Imperial facility, churning out soldiers who were loyal only to the Emperor, molded to enforce his will without question. The horrors of this war would stretch beyond anything seen in the Republic's Clone Wars, tainting the galaxy with atrocities that would leave scars for generations. Economically, the galaxy would suffer as well. The Empire's relentless drive for resources would strain entire systems, stripping planets of their natural wealth to fuel its endless expansion and militarization. Trade routes would be monopolized, and only those who conformed entirely to Imperial regulations would be allowed to engage in commerce. Independent traders and organizations, such as the Trade Federation or the Mining Guild, would be forced into full compliance or face destruction. Economic freedom would evaporate, replaced by a controlled, suffocating network where every transaction served the Empire's needs. The people, especially those on Outer Rim planets, would face extreme poverty and hardship, caught in a system that saw them as little more than cogs in the Imperial machine. The psychological impact on the galaxy's inhabitants would be immense. Fear would become a way of life, and hopelessness would spread like a plague. Under the Empire's iron grip, communities would turn inward, mistrustful of neighbors and fearful of Imperial spies and informants. Families would teach their children to stay silent, to avoid attracting attention, and to suppress any spark of rebellion. Cultural diversity and intergalactic traditions would begin to fade, replaced by a homogenized, Imperial-approved culture devoid of individual expression. This manufactured culture would serve only to bolster the Empire's authority, leaving future generations ignorant of the galaxy's rich past and trapped in a hollow present. The spirit of resistance, which had once ignited sparks of rebellion across the galaxy, would be reduced to fleeting, isolated acts of defiance, quickly crushed by overwhelming Imperial force. Rogue leaders, former rebels, and underground fighters would either go into hiding or be hunted down, their legacies erased from history by the Empire's relentless propaganda machine. The hope that the rebellion had once represented would become a distant memory, a myth spoken of only in secret. In this new era, the heroes of the past would fade from the galaxy's consciousness, replaced by the grim reality of Imperial supremacy. In this timeline, the Force would fall into darkness. The natural harmony between light and dark would be disrupted, casting the galaxy into an imbalance that affected every living being. Without the guiding presence of the light side, the dark side's influence would saturate the galaxy, breeding despair, violence, and fear. Planets once known for their spiritual connection to the Force, like Dagobah and Jedi, would become ghostly reminders of a forgotten era. The echoes of Jedi and Sith alike would haunt these places, yet no one would be left to listen. This alternate reality, one where Yavin 4's destruction marked the end of hope, would see the galaxy transformed into a shadow of its former self. Generations would grow up knowing nothing but the Empire, unaware of the freedom, diversity, and unity that had once defined the galaxy. The stars themselves would seem dimmer, as if the very essence of the cosmos had been drained. The Empire's rule, vast and inescapable, would suffocate all who lived under its gaze, and the memory of a free galaxy would fade, leaving only a void where hope had once thrived. As the Empire solidified its reign, the entire galaxy would gradually shift under the weight of the Death Star's devastating legacy. News of Yavin 4's obliteration would spread like wildfire across star systems, making it clear that the Empire held the ultimate weapon. Entire worlds, realizing the full extent of the Empire's cruelty, would abandon any remaining inclinations toward rebellion, choosing survival over resistance. The destruction of Yavin would become a symbol, a dark reminder that the Empire's reach was limitless, and that even the boldest of fighters could be wiped out in an instant. The oppressive atmosphere would be felt across planets both in the core and the outer rim. Core worlds that once served as cultural and economic hubs like Alderaan before its destruction would now fearfully align with Imperial policies, silencing any opposition. Those who might have quietly supported the rebellion in the core would erase any traces of resistance from their lives. Public executions, already common under the Empire, would increase in frequency as the Empire made examples of suspected sympathizers. Town squares and cities would become places of fear, where crowds were forced to witness the fates of anyone even remotely associated with insurgent activities. Palpatine would seize upon this moment to expand his influence, not only politically and economically, but also in the mystical domain of the Force. Without the threat of the Jedi or Luke Skywalker, he would turn his attention to ancient Sith lore, seeking ways to deepen his connection to the dark side. Unopposed, he would pursue forbidden knowledge, using arcane methods to extend his life and amplify his power. Coruscant's underworld would feel the ripple of this dark power, becoming even more sinister as the Empire's inquisitors roamed, searching for any traces of Force-sensitive beings. Those unlucky enough to be discovered would face relentless persecution or be twisted into agents of the dark side. This unchecked power would allow the Emperor to create an elite, shadowy network of Force-sensitive enforcers trained in dark arts, loyal only to him. These Sith enforcers, as they might come to be known, would operate in the shadows, their presence invisible to most of the galaxy but omnipresent in Palpatine's efforts to spread terror. They would track down and eliminate any remaining Jedi sympathizers or Force-sensitive individuals, leaving no one who could challenge the Emperor's supremacy. Even whispers of Force use would be snuffed out, and the knowledge of the Force, both light and dark, would become the stuff of legends, known only to a select few who dared to study it in secret. The Empire's iron grip on the galaxy would reshape entire civilizations. From the mining colonies in the Outer Rim to the opulent societies in the core worlds, every aspect of life would now be geared towards serving the Empire's interests. Industries would be repurposed to support Imperial needs, with manufacturing planets turning exclusively to weapons production and shipyards operating non-stop to build fleets to patrol every corner of the galaxy. The military-industrial complex would reach a level of dominance never before seen, with most sectors forced into near-total compliance. Any individual or company that resisted would face crushing sanctions or outright obliteration. Life on agrarian worlds like Naboo or Lothal would become even more regimented as the Empire's influence trickled down to every village and town. Local governments would be stripped of their authority, replaced by Imperial governors and officials whose only allegiance was to the Emperor. Surveillance would become pervasive, with even small towns monitored to ensure that Imperial propaganda was upheld. Farming quotas would rise, taxes would increase, and any notion of self-governance would be a distant memory. Families and communities would learn to live in a constant state of fear, mistrusting even their neighbors lest someone report them for disloyalty. In this version of reality, the Death Star would not be a singular weapon, but the first in a series of terror devices the Empire deployed to keep the galaxy in line. Its success at Yavin 4 would give rise to a new class of superweapons, each more destructive than the last. Engineers and scientists forcibly conscripted by the Empire would be tasked with designing deadlier iterations of the Death Star, each capable of eliminating multiple targets in one attack. The development of these weapons would consume vast resources, but the Empire would see it as a necessary cost to maintain dominance over its sprawling territories. A new generation would grow up in this galaxy where Imperial power was unchallenged, knowing nothing of the freedoms their ancestors once enjoyed. Schools would teach a version of history that glorified the Empire, portraying the Rebel Alliance as a group of terrorists who sought to destabilize peace and order. Children would learn to idolize figures like Tarkin and Vader, with tales of their heroic actions woven into educational materials. The Jedi Order would be vilified, if not erased from memory altogether, and any mention of the Force would be tied to cautionary tales warning of the dangers of rebellion against the Empire. For the average citizen, life would be a study in obedience. Employment options would be strictly regulated, with the majority of jobs falling under sectors that served Imperial interests. Farmers would be conscripted to grow crops only for Imperial consumption, miners would work in hazardous conditions with minimal compensation, and even artists would be forced to create pieces that celebrated the Empire's greatness. Creative expression, political thought, and cultural practices would all be subject to scrutiny, ensuring they aligned with the Empire's doctrine. Any deviation from the accepted norms would result in severe punishment, creating a homogenized, fear-stricken society. The galaxy's few remaining non-human species, already marginalized under the Empire, would face an even bleaker fate. The Emperor's xenophobic policies would intensify, with entire species persecuted, enslaved, or exterminated if deemed a threat. The Wookiees, already enslaved, would see their homeworld of Kashyyyk ravaged, with no hope of rescue or liberation. Other species, like the Twi'leks of Ryloth or the Mon Calamari, would endure relentless oppression, their unique cultures and languages suppressed under the Empire's harsh regime. Palpatine's vision of an orderly galaxy would leave little room for diversity, erasing the rich tapestry of civilizations that had once defined the galaxy. With the rebellion's death, smugglers and criminals, who had once operated with relative impunity, would find themselves facing a far harsher reality. Han Solo's death on Yavin 4 would signal the end of an era for those who lived on the fringe, and the Empire would take advantage of the rebellion's fall to crack down on the criminal underworld. The Hutt cartel, Black Sun, and other syndicates would come under Imperial jurisdiction, with Palpatine seizing control of their networks to strengthen his hold on the galaxy. Smugglers and bounty hunters who had previously walked a fine line between legality and outlaw would now face severe penalties if caught, leading to a decline in the once thriving black market. Coruscant, the jewel of the galaxy, would transform further into a fortress of darkness. The Emperor's palace would loom over the cityscape as a symbol of his absolute rule, its halls filled with dark artifacts and relics that embodied the Sith's dominance. The Senate chambers would likely be abandoned, turned into a hollow reminder of the democracy that once existed. Streets that had once been vibrant with life would now be shrouded in silence, with citizens forbidden from gathering in large groups or openly discussing politics. Coruscant's once glorious skyline would be dominated by symbols of the Empire, each one a testament to the regime's unyielding power. The galaxy's hope would be extinguished, with no one to challenge the Emperor. Palpatine's vision of an eternal empire would become a terrifying reality, casting a shadow that would last for centuries. Generations would live and die knowing nothing but the Empire's oppressive rule, its achievements and victories forgotten, buried beneath an unending reign of terror. The galaxy would become a place of uniformity, fear, and control, a far cry from the vibrant, diverse expanse it once was. In this dark reality, the only remnants of hope would be faint, untraceable echoes. Legends might persist in whispers, the ghostly tales of Jedi who once fought for peace and balance, or of a brave pilot named Luke Skywalker who dared to challenge a Death Star. These stories would fade with time, buried under the weight of Imperial propaganda. The light would be extinguished, and in its place, an all-consuming darkness would reign supreme, leaving the galaxy to endure an eternity under the Empire's iron fist.